Hey everyone, really glad to say that I did go ahead and get my hands on another MSI X870 motherboard. This one's actually the Tomahawk. Really good mid-range motherboard, not as pricey as the Gaming Pro Carbon that I usually like to use and myself and actually do a review on as well too. This one actually retails for a little over 300, sometimes even a little less. There definitely have been some deals, especially combo deals with X870 motherboards lately. So I'll definitely go ahead and check it out, particularly this time of the season. Those prices may actually go down, especially if you're, like I said, doing a combo price. So this motherboard's one I'm really looking forward to actually taking a look at. Usually the Tomahawk motherboards do not actually include Wi-Fi. This one fortunately actually does by its name, Wi-Fi 7, and it's really nice to know that's the latest generation of Wi-Fi. So let's go ahead and get this opened up, take a look at the motherboard, do a full installation of CPU memory, a full build, and check out the BIOS as well too. MSI does have a new GUI for the BIOS, so let's go ahead and check that out right now. I am really glad to get my hands on this particular motherboard. The Tomahawk series has always been something just a little bit under the Gaming Pro Carbon, but usually not really missing much. If anything, it's usually just missing the Wi-Fi, and obviously this one does not spare the Wi-Fi. It is actually included on this particular motherboard here. So I'm guessing if you're really looking for a mid-range board, this actually might be the one you are looking for. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back here. Give you a nice little picture of the board itself. And you can actually see all the ports and the I/O shield right in the back, and everything else that's included in this. USB 40 Gbps, Wi-Fi 7. Looks like we do have a 5G LAN, which is nice. This board probably, I would have been on the assumption it only has a 2.5. And looks like it has some pretty good amount of USB and USB-C goodness in the back here. So let's go ahead and get this opened up. Take a quick look at what we got here. Here we have the box within the box. Over here, usually MSI likes to put the antenna, the Wi-Fi antenna, and go ahead and take a look at that in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and remove the motherboard here. Definitely has some weight to it, just like its Gaming Pro counterpart. And let's see what we got here. Looks like we have some cable stickers here. Shout out, looks like a little how to enter MSI experience, help others choose by letting them know why you choose MSI. Maybe this is like another little incentive to do a review or basically give some feedback on the board. Quick installation guide here. Just open that here to give you a general idea what they're mentioning here. Looks like that has to do with the CPU socket and front panel connectors right there. European Union regulatory notices. Over here we have a little thumb drive, probably with drivers, and feel free to go ahead and use it for basically updating your BIOS. Throw on the latest firmware on here and plug it in just to go ahead and update your motherboard with the latest BIOS if you choose to do so. Here we do have two, actually no, sorry about that. Here we have two SATA cables. Here we have, looks like RGB cables here, if I'm correct. This is something interesting. This looks like some sort of new universal fan connection. I'll definitely get into that in a little bit. Actually, I could be mistaken. That actually could be the front panel connectors right there. I'm going to have to really take a look at that in a moment. Looks like this is a little riser screw for the M2 slot if you're going to put the NVMe drive in there. And this might just be another little screw related to that as well too. So let's go ahead and take a look at the motherboard once we get it out of the anti-static sleeve. As always, I always try never to rip this because, ooh, that was actually pretty easy to take off. These anti-static bags, you can never have enough of them. And the motherboard ones are always a really good one to collect. And there is our board. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rear of the motherboard here, or basically the I/O ports on the back plate here. Looks like beginning here on the left, we do have the flash BIOS button right over here. You can go ahead and plug in your thumb drive with the latest BIOS firmware on that thumb drive without the use of a CPU or memory installed. And there's one particular port here that's specifically labeled here. You'll have a USB port plugged in. You go ahead and press that little BIOS button and the whole process will begin. The little LED light, I believe, will begin flashing. Once it's solid, your BIOS is ready to go. Usually takes a couple of minutes. There's also the reset the CMOS right over here. A little button there. Just be careful. Occasionally I've actually picked up my computer and accidentally pressed this button. Even with the computer disconnected, it actually did reset all my settings back to default, and that's a little irritating. I believe there must be a setting on the motherboard to go ahead and disable that. I have to look into that because I've actually done that with one of my computers once already so far, and just a minor irritation and a bother. It's still a little bit of a waste of time. Moving on here, we do have a HDMI port over here. If your CPU Ryzen 7000, 8000, and 9000 series does have built-in GPU, feel free to go ahead and plug in your monitor to this HDMI port. There are other connections available. I'll get to that in just a moment. But that's one of the main ports here you can go ahead and use if you are using the onboard GPU as opposed to a dedicated card here. If you are using a dedicated card, obviously we'll not be using this. Speaking of onboard, right over here we have two USB-C style ports over here. And my understanding is both of them can be used for display as well, to basically like acting like a display port connection right there. Right above here we do have a USB 3.2 port in color red. And over here we have a USB 3.2 ports right over here labeled as blue. Speaking of USB ports, we have 4 USB 2.0 ports right over here. And that's basically for your keyboard, mouse, webcam, printer, some other device that really does not need USB 3 connection here. And I believe they do that basically just to not hog up all the speed away from all the USB 3 ports for important stuff, like actually using them for keyboard and mouse and other stuff like that. So you do have those connections right over here available as well too. Over here on the right, we do have an additional USB-C style connection here labeled as 10G. These are actually labeled 40G if I see correctly. So feel free to go ahead and connect any device here. And even though these connections over here on the left are actually can be used as display, feel free to go ahead and plug in any USB-C style connection or port right over here. Just above here, we do have an additional USB 3.2 port right over here. And over here, we do have an Ethernet connection here. That's actually 5G speed. Very nice to see. Many of the connections here for mid-range and lower range boards are actually 2.5G. This one's actually 5G, so that's very nice to know. Over here on the right, we do have the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connection here, the Wi-Fi 7 connections here for your antenna. If you're going to go ahead and take advantage of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or both, feel free to go ahead and the antennas over here for those connections. So even if you're just planning to use Bluetooth, you do have to have these connections right here, or the range of your Bluetooth will be really low and weak. And further on the right, just the last few connections here are your onboard sound connection. Looks like we do have a SPDIF connection here for optical, your regular stereo regular stereo connection, and it looks like a line out connection right above here. So I'm going to go over some of these connections over here as best as I possibly can. Some of them are not really fully described or labeled in the motherboard manual that you can download from MSI's website in PDF format. Let's go ahead and go over the ones I actually recognize immediately offhand. Right over here, immediately right down here, we do have the front panel audio connection here. If you do have your case with the front panel audio connections for stereo microphone, feel free to go ahead and plug that in here. I do know some dedicated sound cards do have this connection available for you as well if you want to actually take advantage of it. Over here we do have a 3-pin, actually I apologize, looks like a 4-pin RGB connection here if you are planning to use RGB lighting. Here is one connection here, and right next to it, it looks like a 3-pin available right over here as well too. Here's one of those connections right over here that then wasn't really fully described on the motherboard. I can definitely follow up on that very shortly. But right next to that, to the right, we do have a 4-pin system fan connection right over here. There's going to be a couple of more of those on this board. Looks like that's a number 5, so definitely expect to see quite a few more, maybe up to another additional 4, plus your CPU, plus your fan connection for pump. And to the right of that, we do have an 8-pin PCI Express, dedicated PCI Express power connector. Now, I have actually been asked a couple of questions. What happens if you actually do not connect this? I don't believe this is really needed unless you have a lot of PCI Express connections here, or you are going to be plugging in a very overpowered dedicated video card, probably like the newer GeForce 4000 or even the upcoming GeForce 5000 series from NVIDIA. I'm sure some AMD video cards may actually be overpowered as well too. Well, overpowered, I mean that in a very friendly term. So it may require this particular connection over here, but if you actually plan to just use a regular video card, nothing too crazy, this probably won't even be needed anymore, as video cards actually do have their dedicated power connectors directly from the power supply. To the right of that 8-pin power connector, we do have two USB 2 front panel connections right over here, labeled as USB. And as many people may think, well, you know, USB 2 is kind of mostly out of date, and my case does not even have front panel USB 2 connections. Sometimes certain devices on your motherboard, such as a power supply, for example, from Corsair, does it actually use this particular connection here to go ahead and enable you to monitor voltage, RPM, and other little connections there as well too on your power supply using the software. So just something to keep in mind, some connections do use these front panel connections for USB. Further to the right here, we do have two additional system fan connections. Looks like this one's actually labeled as 5, this one's 4. The other one's probably just labeled another number. But we do have two additional 4-pin fan connections right over here. And very similar to the lower left side here, we have two additional 3-pin RGB connections right over here. So this motherboard definitely does not have lack of these particular connections over here. Further to the right here, this is a very common connection here. We do have our front panel connections here for your case. Basically your power switch, power button, reset button, hard drive LED. And right above here, we do have the standard 4-pin speaker connection, which is barely used anymore. But if you happen to have one of those, you can definitely go ahead and plug that in so you can hear the little beeps and blips that the computer makes upon booting up and posting. Moving on to the right side of the motherboard here, we do have two front panel USB 3 or 3.2 connections right over here. So this is actually really nice to see. I have actually commented previously on some upper tier motherboards only have one of these connections. This one actually has two, so that's really nice to see. And definitely does not lack a front panel USB-C style connection, which I'm definitely going to take a look at in just a bit. Further to the right over here, we do have 4 SATA connections right over here. While SATA is actually pretty much becoming a little bit less popular these days because of the use of NVMe and M2 slots, we do have these connections here that are still available for optical drives and mechanical hard drives. Most computers utilize at least one of them, so there's 4 of them right here for you to use. Further to the right over here, we do have a front panel USB-C style connection right over here. I was actually beginning to worry once I saw these two front panel 3.0, 3.2 connections here that maybe this particular connection would be lacking on this motherboard, but it's not true. It is available here. So if you do have a USB-C style front panel connection, this is where your connection will actually go ahead on the motherboard. Now, I did mention earlier that there is actually a cable that was included on this motherboard that's basically kind of like a dedicated fan connection. I believe this actually might be it right over here. Basically a fan connection with RGB in one cable, which actually makes it a little bit easier to go ahead and connect to the motherboard. So I'm not sure if that connection will actually become standard, if I'm correct, if this is actually the right connection. But it seems like it's something that's probably going to be rolled out little by little, so we'll see how that goes. Further to the right over here, we do have the standard 24-pin power connection here from your power supply to give the motherboard power. Very standard connection here. It's been very popular for several years now, and probably will be for some time considering how many power supplies depend on this particular connection over here. And further to the right up here, we do have the little diagnostic LED screen right over here. So as your system posts up, you'll see this particular LED screen change into different codes. If it actually does not post, you'll see a particular code on the stagnant screen right over here, giving you an idea what the issue might be. And not to be missed, right up here, we do have the 4 DIMM slots here for your memory. Looks like the clip is, take a look here. It's actually on both sides over here in case you were wondering. Feel free to go ahead and install your memory chips right over here, and particularly in dual channel, just use this slot over here and this slot right over here for optimized performance. Just above that little LED diagnostic screen right over here, we do have two additional system fan connections right over here. Looks like number 3 and number 2, if I see correctly. And over here is another little pin that I swear I could have remembered what this was, but unfortunately it really escapes me from the description. But almost completely missed right over here. These little 4 looking LED little things here, really hard to tell. Basically your diagnostic lights here, in case this was actually not present. These actually change from white, yellow to red or orange actually, to let you know that a particular device connected to the motherboard, such as the CPU, memory, GPU, are actually up and running. So if something here stays orange and red and does not change at all, that actually might be the issue with your motherboard, causing the system not to post. Taking a look at the top of the motherboard here, we do have 3 additional 4-pin fan connections. One of them appears to be your CPU fan right over here. It looks like the white one is a pump connection if you're going to be using water cooling on your CPU. This is where you actually go ahead and pump and connect the pump. And right over here is the additional system fan number 1 connection right over here, in case you're actually looking out for that. Not to be missed whatsoever is our CPU socket, socket AM5 for your Ryzen CPU. Basically this little lever comes up right over here, and this piece of plastic pops off once you install your CPU, and as you're closing it and close the lever, poof, this little thing pops up. I usually like to remove the plastic prior to that, because when I've actually installed the CPU and put the lever back in, this little piece of plastic literally pops up almost into the air. At one point it actually almost hit my ceiling, so just something to keep in mind. It's just a personal preference. I don't think there's any harm done removing the plastic before, even though many people will try to call you out and say, well, you should probably just leave the plastic until the CPU is installed. Do not throw this away. It's very good to keep on hand in case you do remove the CPU and move this motherboard into storage, or just keep it on the side for the time being. This will actually keep dust and other particles from falling in, or just accidental physical damage to your pins. So something really nice that some motherboard manufacturers have actually implemented here for the M2 slots when you're installing an NVMe drive is, rather than actually using the little screw, even though this one in particular does have one, we do have this little eject release button right over here. Once you press it, I actually just moved the entire motherboard doing that. Let's try that again. You press this, and it comes out revealing the M2 slot goodness right over there. Very easy to go ahead and reinstall. Just line it up with this little slide over here, and go ahead and just push the clip, and you should be all set to go. There's actually an additional one up here with a heatsink built in. I'm going to go ahead and press that, and you'll see this comes right off as well too. So very nice to actually see here. We do have our NVMe slot right over here, M2 slot right down here as well too. That is pretty much it for a quick overview of the motherboard itself. Just taking a look at a lot of connections here, and of course all the connections on the motherboard rear right over here on the I/O port, and backplate right over here that's actually built onto the motherboard, which is really nice. Gone are the days where you forget to put the backplate and you have to literally unscrew everything on the motherboard and take the whole thing back out to install that, or just bite your lip and just live with it, which really looks horrible when looking from the back. So obviously built-in I/O plate, I/O shield right back here always really helps. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and get this installed on the computer case, get the CPU memory installed, heatsink installed, and let's see where we go. If everything boots up okay, I'll go ahead and take a look at the BIOS and do a quick overview there. So let's go ahead and hit it. Our system is up and running over here. Now, one little odd thing I did notice is that for some reason the BIOS is actually showing in a widescreen over here. Now, obviously I do have a widescreen monitor here, but you can actually see the top and bottom black bars here as I'm watching like a widescreen movie on like a 4x3 TV or something. So very interesting. I haven't actually seen this before, so maybe perhaps a BIOS update will probably resolve this. This one's actually a little older than previous X870 MSI motherboards I've actually seen, the BIOS build date. So maybe a BIOS update will actually go ahead and take care of this for us. But regardless, you can actually still see all the function and everything going on over here. So let's go ahead and get started. The system actually did take about a minute to fully post. And even once I saw something appear on the screen, it rebooted maybe once or twice before giving me the BIOS screen right over here. So we can immediately see here, MSI Click BIOS X. We do have the easy mode and advanced mode here in MSI's new GUI for their motherboard BIOSes. Over here on the top right corner, we do have a couple of little buttons over here. We have M Flash, as I mentioned. I'm probably going to go ahead and update the BIOS on this. Feel free to go ahead and click here once you have your thumb drive plugged in with the latest firmware on the thumb drive itself. Favorites over here, you can go ahead and click here to go ahead and set some favorite areas you'd like to go ahead and access just by hitting the hotkey. BIOS log, if you click here, you can actually go ahead and take a look at all the changes that have been previously made and saved as well too, in case you basically forgot. Want to backtrack a change you actually just made, you'll feel free to go ahead and take a look here and see those changes that were previously saved. MSI Performance Preset, go ahead and click here. Usually when first booting up the motherboard, and you'll actually be presented with this screen over here, to go ahead and choose Auto or Enable. Profile, you can actually go ahead and save some preset profiles here, depending on all the settings you actually went ahead and set up. You can even go ahead and export or even import profiles from your USB thumb drive, especially if you're going to go ahead and update the BIOS. It may actually wipe out your saved profiles here, so a thumb drive definitely comes in handy in case of that. Hardware monitor over here, basically one of my favorite features in MSI motherboards. Go ahead and click here to go ahead and manipulate fan speeds according to the temperature thresholds over here. Go ahead and change any options you'd like to go ahead here. You can actually go ahead and see CPU fan and the one system fan I do have connected here. I actually did have a second one, but I left it disconnected for the time being. So feel free to go ahead and manipulate all that. Right now, usually the CPU fan is set to smart mode by default. Further on the right here, we do have the help button. Feel free to go ahead and click here if you want to go ahead and take a look at some options and preset hotkeys right over here. Search, if there's a particular option that you're actually looking for, feel free to go ahead and click here and just search for it within the motherboard BIOS. Snapshot, if you actually do have a thumb drive plugged in, feel free to go ahead and click on here to just save a snapshot of basically a screenshot of your current status right now on the BIOS. If you actually do click on it and there's no thumb drive involved, you'll immediately see no USB device is found. And exit, once you click here, you can go ahead and just basically save configuration, or just go ahead and ignore your changes and just go ahead and reboot the motherboard and exit the BIOS. Taking a look further down here, we do have a CPU game boost option, which is currently disabled at the moment. You can actually go ahead and enable that if you'd like. NPU AI boost, if you want to go ahead and enable or disable that. Memory profile boost here, you can actually go ahead and click here to engage on the profiles that are currently built in. This one does have one, so you can immediately see that the one Expo profile is saved right over here. Some information on your motherboard here. We do see the full name of the motherboard, the current BIOS version, build date, right down here, and your current motherboard temperature currently at 43 degrees Celsius. Down here, we do have some easy control options here. Precision Boost Overdrive, which is currently set to auto. Memory Try It. VGA detection, currently set to auto. If you do have a dedicated video card, feel free to go ahead and choose Ignore. And MSI Driver Utility Installer, which is currently enabled. Now, this particular option here, basically, once you have your operating system installed and up and running, you go ahead and this will immediately automatically bring up a screen to go ahead and give you the option to install drivers for your devices, currently like sound card, video card, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and other devices currently on the motherboard. Bear in mind, if you actually do have this enabled, you only see this once. You can go ahead and just ignore it or just go engage in the installations, and it's not going to come up every time you boot up your computer. Over here on easy on and off, you have some additional options here. CPU fan fail warning control, temperature unit, go ahead and choose between Celsius and Fahrenheit, FTPM 2.0, easy LED control, and ERP ready, which is currently disabled. On the right here, we do have some additional information on our devices here. CPU, full name of the CPU, the AMD Ryzen 7700 8-core processor, currently running at 3.8 gigahertz. There, of course, is your CPU temperature and core voltage. Down here, we do have some memory information. Currently, we do have 2 sticks of G.Skill memory, 16 gigs each, total of 32 gigabytes. You can actually see each DIMM slot here, 2 of them empty, 2 of them occupied, total memory. And some other options here. If you can go ahead and click on your information, you can see some additional information there. There are currently no storage devices here, SATA or NVMe drives, so you're going to see currently all of them are not present. And just below we do see fan profiles. You can again see the CPU fan profile and the additional system fan number 5 and their current RPMs at the moment. Down here we do have the current date and time. Currently a little bit out of date, but here we go. Just click on that to go ahead and change it as you need to. And down here on the lower left, we do have boot priority. Go ahead and move these around as you need to. Go ahead and prioritize, or just go ahead and deselect other devices as you need to boot up whenever your computer turns on. That is pretty much it for easy mode over here. I'm going to go ahead and click on advanced, or just hit the F7 key. Immediately take you to advanced mode over here. Now I did actually note this in previous new GUI on MSI motherboards here. This little thing, this little toolbar that just keeps coming back and forth, it can be disabled, so basically it just remains stagnant. But obviously a little bit annoying right over there. See if I can find that setting there. Sometimes it eludes me every time I update the BIOS. I have to go ahead and rechange it, and sometimes I forget where it actually is. Maybe the search option might actually help us there. But let's go ahead and take a look here. We do have a couple options here. System status. If you are here, you can immediately see the system date and time, some information on your hard drives over here, system information, some additional details on your BIOS version, BIOS build date, physical memory, cache size, and some other information here. Click on DMI information to take a look at that as well too. Click on advanced here. We can immediately see some other options here. PCI Express, PCI subsystem settings. Some options over here. Actually go ahead and choose the generation mode of certain M2 slots. ACPI settings. Your built-in devices right over here. Feel free to go ahead and engage this here. If you actually want to go ahead and disable certain devices like your sound card, or even disable the onboard Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or just go ahead and have one particular option of either of the two over here. Integrated graphics configuration. You can actually go ahead and choose a dedicated PEG or IGDD if you're going to be using the integrated graphics on your CPU. USB configuration. Power management setup over here. BIOS, UEFI, CSM mode. Feel free to go ahead and choose a particular option if you plan to use legacy boot devices. Wake up event setup. Secure arrays, having to do with currently connected SSDs or NVMe drives. At this point, I don't have any installed at the moment, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip that. There is our MSI driver utility installer. Again, if you have this enabled, on the first boot up or the second boot up of your operating system, you will be presented with a window coming directly from the motherboard to install drivers for your motherboard. NVMe SSD self-test. And AMD overclocking. Here, of course, is the warning screen. If you want to go ahead and accept that, just be really careful with any overclocking options you actually choose, you could potentially damage your motherboard or other devices currently connected to it. Speaking of overclocking, we did that as a particular option over here. Click on overclocking, and with it, be presented with a bunch of options over here. Currently, right now, it's set on expert mode. I'm guessing if you choose normal, some options will actually not be presented to you. Here we do have some options regarding CPU. One little option I actually prefer to turn off over here, just for demonstration purposes. I do go into advanced CPU configuration, engage AMD CBS, and I actually turn off the core performance boost off for the moment. Feel free to actually go ahead and leave this turned off if you notice your CPU temperature is being reported just a little bit too high. You just want to go ahead and just disable that, and just turn off and disable some particular automatic overclocking option over here. There are additional options over here for your CPU, as you can see here. Just below here, looks like we have some options here for the memory, and some other options over here as well too. One option over here that's very curious is called Memory Context Restore. Feel free to go ahead and enable this. It basically just tells your motherboard not to go ahead and re-engage and retraining, as you see down here on the memory every time the computer restarts or boots up. It just basically slows down the post time. And some additional voltage related options down here as well too regarding your CPU and memory. Security over here, you can go ahead and set up an administrator password for your BIOS. Trusted computing is basically your TPM over here. Chassis intrusion configuration, one of those little ports, pins that I mentioned on the motherboard that I did not identify or recognize is probably one of these little connections here. If your case actually does have that option, feel free to go ahead and connect that little cable to that connection there. Secure boot options are over here as well too. Speaking of boot, go ahead and click on boot. To manually go ahead and choose your boot devices down here. This actually might look really familiar on previous MSI motherboards. And of course, save and exit. Just go ahead and save or discard changes over here as you need to go ahead and do right here. Basically, the other options down here, you can see boot priority yet again. Everything on the top is pretty much the same. Your date and time is down here. And motherboard, CPU, memory, and voltage information is here on the right. And there is our motherboard right over there installed. I do not see any visible LED or built-in RGB on the motherboard itself. The only colors I actually see coming out are from the CPU and of course the memory over here. Of course there is a little LED screen right there that does tell you if there's something wrong with your motherboard when it's attempting to post. I actually did see one of my MSI motherboards just a moment ago turning on one of my computers. The 1.5 was actually stuck there, and the little LEDs indicators on top had a red and an orange color right over there. And my computer was actually not posting. But after about a minute and a half, looks like it actually posted up really nicely. I did go ahead and reboot it, and everything worked out. So, obviously, if you do see stuff like that happen, go ahead and check out the codes. And, of course, the little color code on the LEDs are up there to see what is preventing your board from booting up. Very, very useful options there, as opposed to just seeing the motherboard boot up, computer boot up, and nothing appears on the screen. So, motherboard looks like it's very quiet. Everything appears to be working A-OK. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that video here, the build, the motherboard overview, and of course the BIOS overview, as I always enjoy doing. Go ahead and shoot that like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I will definitely be posting some additional motherboard reviews and unboxings, and I really hope you're enjoying all that as well too. Thanks again for watching, everyone, and as always, stay safe. Take care. Bye.